Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the December SAME DC Post First Friday. My name is Whitney Stoll. I'll be your host for today, and joined by me is Sam Lee. We're going to get started in just a moment, but right now, feel free to use the chat, enter your contact information, your LinkedIn profile, where you're calling in from, how much snow you've gotten so far. It's just a dusting here in the DC area, but if you're getting more, let us know. Or you're taking this call from a chairlift somewhere out and you're going skiing, whatever it might be. We're going to get started in just a moment. I'd be impressed if someone's skiing right now while they're listening to this, but we'll see. All right, we got about 1.5 inches out in Ashburn. Wow. All right, Nick, yeah, 62 degrees. All right, how horrible. Awful. Well, with that, it's about 2 minutes past the hour. Why don't we dive into it? So again, my name is Whitney Stoll, DC Post First Friday host. Welcome back, and this is our last First Friday webinar for the year with our guest Sam Lee and his program presentation, FAR Reform Updates. Joined by me are Samantha Long and Bree Beal. We're behind the scenes moderating our webinar today. We'll also be monitoring the chat. So we have over 100 registered participants from all over the world, and we're ready to learn during today's First Friday webinar. So in today's webinar, Sam will share with you some of the latest updates on the federal acquisition regulation revolutionary reform, and what you need to know about those changes from both the legislative and executive branches that will affect GovCon going forward. But first, I'd like to welcome you all to our First Friday webinar series, which is provided to you through SAME's commitment to offering the AEC community effective training, development, and networking programs. The DC Post is helping sustain the future of this profession with these monthly education-focused sessions that will help align the SAME strategic goal to drive partnerships, deliver solutions, and develop people. So again, thank you for joining us here today as we start our program. So please use the chat to introduce yourself, share your LinkedIn profile, where you're calling in from today, and your email to share it with everyone else at any time throughout the program today. Ask questions in the chat so we can address them during the Q&A portion at the end. And you can chat with everyone and send messages to our hosts, presenters, and each other throughout today's webinar. We are recording today's session, and we will post the video on our YouTube channel later on. A copy of your slides, a PDH certificate, and an opt-in list of attendees will be available to download at the end of today's webinar. And we will also email you a copy as soon as the webinar ends. So please look for our email labeled document delivery, the subject line with the downloads following today's webinar session. So we are excited to provide you an hour of education, virtual networking, no matter where you're calling in from. And we would like to take a moment to thank our DC Post First Friday sponsors, Fox Rothschild, KCCT, Parsons, and Stantec. We do truly appreciate your support, and we are grateful for your generosity by making this webinar series possible for our members and throughout the SAME community. So if you're not already a DC Post sponsor and would like to support our posts with annual sponsorship, we'd love to add your name to the slide for future programs and events through 2026. Annual Platinum sponsors and First Friday sponsors help support this event with free registration for SAME members and full-time students. So please visit our website for more information about sponsorship levels and how you can gain visibility for your company while giving back to the SAME community through your DC Post sponsorship. And now for this time for the main program. Please note this program does provide one professional development hour from the DC Post. And while I'm not going to read the learning objectives on the slides, since most of you saw the same objectives, I'm going to introduce to you our featured speaker in just a moment. And if you haven't done so already, please feel free to use the chat, introduce yourselves, share any type of contact information. This is your webinar series to help you learn about the special topic and expand your network at the same time. Please use the chat throughout the presentation to share comments, ask questions. If there is a particular slide you want to talk about at the moment, please share that detail in your chat question. We'll answer the questions at the end of the program. You will not be able to save the chat, so be sure to take any notes of everyone you connected with before the webinar ends. And now let's please welcome our presenter for the DC Post First Friday webinar, Sam Lee of Sam Lee Law. So Sam is a former director of policy planning and liaison for the U.S. Small Business Administration and founder of GovCon Intelligence. Sam has 2 decades of federal procurement law experience and a track record of growing small business contract awards by 50%. He is a leading voice of FAR reform, SBA regulations, and federal contracting strategy. So Sam, great to have you here today. Really appreciate it. It's a great December event, and I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thanks so much, Whitney. Thank you to you and Bree and Samantha for having me on. Thanks very much to the SAME Washington, D.C. Post. I'm out here in Fairfax near the Mosaic District. We've got maybe like a half inch. It wasn't too hard getting in. I'm going to venture out to the stores for holiday shopping when this is all over. My wife told me it's easier for me to walk in and buy kind of jewelry for my teenage girls because the shopkeepers won't keep me there and talk my ear off and try to upsell me. So we'll save some time. I'll just go to the shop and get what they need and head on out. I will not be wrapping the gifts though. That goes on to my partner in crime here. I'm going to go through the FAR overhaul. That's been a big topic over really this whole year of 2025. It got kicked off very early in the spring of the administration, and we're to a point now where we've seen all of the new FAR rules. Some people call them drafts, model deviations. The FAR overhaul rules have all been published, and we're in an interim period where we're waiting to see what the next stage of the process will be and how long that will take. So I'm going to start with mostly an overview of the process because some of that's uncertain. I think there's some confusion, and to be honest, I'm a bit confused about what the next step is. And it's even more confusing if you're a contractor because you're really dealing with 2 different sets of regulations. We'll go over that. And then we'll look more closely at each of the FAR parts that I think are significant to mostly small businesses. That's my background, but I put in a bit more here for engineering firms and firms that are involved in government procurement generally. So we'll go through those as well. Of course, the slides are available for download. I do have a few extra slides here to honor my status as an elder millennial. So you'll see that as you go through. I left them out of the download just because I didn't want to run into copyright problems. So we'll have some fun with it as you go through. Well, let's focus on the revolutionary FAR overhaul. I know there's a lot going on, particularly today. There's news that all 8A firms received a request from SBA. So we will have some question and answer time at the end of the session. If you want to talk about some of the newest developments, feel free to save your question for then. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. And as Whitney mentioned, I write a newsletter. I go on my newsletter probably every week to share updates on government contracting, mostly focused on small business. So this week I talked about the FAR overhaul. I do some videos on there. I'll probably get into the 8A audit that got kicked off today with letters to 8A firms, maybe today, maybe early next week. But you can subscribe by going onto that QR code, and you'll see the QR code as we go through each of the slides as well. But free newsletter, please subscribe. Really no cost to you do that, and you get the latest on what's happening in small business government contracting and my small business focused opinions on that. So I have a particular point of view after working almost 20 years at the SBA, working almost my whole adult life with small businesses. So I'm certainly a small business champion on this, and it gives you a bit of different perspective than what you might get from the FAR Council or law firms or other organizations that are out there. Thanks very much. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to go through the process of the FAR overhaul, and it started out with an executive order from the spring, Executive Order 14275, to transform the federal acquisition regulation. The federal acquisition regulation was referred to in this executive order as an onerous bureaucracy. I felt a bit attacked because I was part of that onerous bureaucracy. I was still in the government at April 2025. But they wanted to change the FAR to create a streamlined set of essential regulations. The change would be to limit the new FAR to provisions that are required by statute or essential to sound procurement. So essentially get rid of all the extra stuff, things that might not be required, and limit the FAR to only those provisions that are statutory. The FAR currently is about 2,000 pages, and the revision cut that by about 20 to 30% by getting rid of things that are not required by statute. Now, those aren't deleted entirely. A lot of them go into supplemental materials, and we'll talk a bit about how to find those. So in some ways, it's a shifting of regulations from stuff that's in the FAR to they've created more supplemental materials, something called a companion guide. There'll be buying guides that come out. There's a category management guide. So there's different, mostly in PDF, there's different documents that have taken on the material that was cut from the FAR. The executive order set a 180-day deadline to issue this new set of regulations. The council that writes the FAR council was able to meet that deadline. It was just shortly before the government shutdown, September 30th, that they were able to release all the parts of the reformed FAR. And one interesting part about the executive order, and something that we'll be watching over the next few years, is most of the FAR is required by statute, but there are portions that are non-statutory. That means they're not required by law. One of the examples is the rule of two that applies to small business set-asides. That's non-statutory. The executive order creates a 4-year sunset period for non-statutory rules. Essentially, what that means is they get 4 years in this revision of the FAR, and then at the end of 4 years, the FAR Council is to look at those non-statutory rules again to see whether they should be renewed for presumably the next 4 years. We'll see what happens as we get closer to that. I don't think anybody's really prepared to figure out, first of all, what those rules are, but also what the process is to review them. At this point, they're just trying to finalize this revision. And my sense is that 4 years won't kick off until the FAR overhaul is actually finalized, which at this point may not happen for several months because they haven't kicked off the final rulemaking process yet. The executive order was followed up by the creation of the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul website. This is where you can get all those supplementary materials. It's at acquisition.gov/FAR-overhaul. Now, by the way, when you download these slides, you can click on all these links that I've put in. So I've created helpful links to all of the source materials for each of these slides. The FAR Overhaul website has these additional materials, the FAR Companion Guide version 2. That's really significant, by the way, for architect engineer firms. I'll mention that as we get to that part of the FAR, but there's some interesting material there that I think is different from anything else that you've seen for the FAR overhaul. So it is worth it to take a look at that website and read through the companion guide for the sections of the FAR that you're most familiar with. The FAR overhaul website also has a practitioner album. There's one for each part of the FAR. The FAR has 50 parts. It's actually numbered 1 through 52, but there are 2 that are missing in that count. So there's 50 parts, so there's 50 practitioner albums, and the practitioner albums act as an explainer for what happened between the old FAR and this overhauled FAR. There's a change summary, it kind of goes point by point as to what changed. There's a line out, so it has the text of the old FAR, and it's a cross out of all the sections that were taken away. And for some of the sections, there are videos. For others, there's what they call smart accelerators, which are strategies that agencies can use to take advantage of new discretion authority that they found in the FAR. So, for example, one of the strategies is an advisory down select, and we'll talk about that with Part 15, a new way of eliminating firms from competition. And so if you see a new term come out from an agency as to, oh, they're doing something new with something like an advisory down select, you can probably go to the Smart Accelerator to learn more about how that might play out and what the vision is for the agency using that new strategy. But Smart Accelerators are really a way to explain to agencies, the buyers, the contracting officers, that they may have new discretionary authority under the FAR because the FAR has taken a lot of that discretion out of the regulation, kind of left it up to agencies, and they can take advantage of that in varying ways. The Revolutionary FAR Overhaul is abbreviated as RFO, and the timeline is occurring in 2 phases. So the first phase was publication of all of these drafts, or what they're calling model deviations. And that's already occurred. The model deviations are all out. Agencies are allowed and they're encouraged, actually, they're supposed to be required, but a lot of agencies haven't done it. They've been encouraged to adopt these model deviations right away. You can see on the FAR website which agencies have adopted, which ones haven't. For example, the Department of Transportation has adopted every single one. General Services Administration has adopted every single one. But some agencies, like Department of Defense, has not adopted any of the model deviations. They have not adopted any of these drafts. And then even within the agencies that have adopted the drafts, it's not clear that all those agencies are actually putting the new provisions into their contracts or actually following the prescriptions that are in the model deviation. So the implementation at this point is sporadic. Some agencies are using the RFO, some agencies aren't. And even those that are using them are not necessarily using them in every acquisition. One big development that we've seen over the past few weeks is GSA has said that they're using the new RFO text for their next GSA schedule refresh. So they're putting all the new revolutionary FAR overhaul provisions in their GSA schedule. So that's the first phase, this sporadic agency implementation. The second phase is formal rulemaking with notice and comment. We expect to see this sometime over the next few months. It would mean at the end of that process that new FAR, that revolutionary FAR, would become a final rule, and every agency would be required to use it. This is the normal process that agencies use to issue regulations. So there's a lot of history behind it. There's a lot of case law behind it. The big question on this formal rulemaking is the FAR Council going to issue the whole revolutionary FAR overhaul at once, which is maybe about 1,500 pages for the public to review and comment on, or would they do it in a staggered manner in the same way that they issued the revolutionary FAR overhaul? I've heard both perspectives. It'd be nice if they did it in a staggered way, so you wouldn't have to prepare all your comments on the entire FAR at once. But it's really up to them how they go forward with it. There's no requirement to do a staggered process. Now, the timeline for this is uncertain. There's a couple reasons that the timeline is uncertain. I put them up there on the slide. One is almost all FAR rules have to go to an office at the White House called OIRA. I think it's the Office of Information and Regulatory Administration, I think. The OIRA is within the Office of Managed Budget. It essentially reviews all significant rulemakings to ensure that it complies with administration policy. The FAR overhaul was issued so quickly that it did not go through this OIRA office. But when the FAR Council goes out with notice and comment, they likely will have to go through OIRA, unless there's some sort of exception. There may be an OIRA exception that's issued at some point. But if they have to go through OIRA, that's a 90-day process at OIRA. And it has not occurred yet, because you can check on OIRA's website whether something has been submitted for review there. And as of yesterday, nothing had been submitted. So if it does have to go through OIRA and it sits at OIRA, that's a 90-day process, and that will delay the kickoff of this notice and comment process. And then additionally, rules that have a significant effect on small businesses and other small entities have to be reviewed for the Regulatory Flexibility Act. That's an act that's overseen by the SBA Office of Advocacy, and that advocacy office could review the rule as well. And that takes additional time to prepare what they call the Initial Regulatory Flexibility Analysis, or IRFA. Okay, so once that's all done, the proposed rule will come out and the public will get an opportunity to comment. I really encourage companies that are affected by the RFO to comment on provisions that they like, that they don't like. The Supreme Court requires all agencies to consider and respond to significant comments. So if you put a comment in, that forces a response from the agency. And it may be that the FAR overhaul did something wrong, or they didn't consider a cost of something on small businesses. We'll get some of the costs as we go through the slide deck. And it's incumbent on your business that's affected by that change to comment on it so that the agency can consider and respond to that comment. So what was done in this FAR overhaul? Well, a lot of it was trying to reduce the number of words, the number of pages in the FAR. That was really the goal stated in the executive order. Additionally, to try to get rid of some of the non-discretionary stuff and maybe move that over to the companion guide, there were 1,951 instances of shall or must that were removed from the FAR. The idea that now we're removing requirements both on agencies, that's why they have more discretion now, and on contractors. The shalls that remained were changed to a must. That's just I guess, a stylistic preference of the FAR that they'd rather use the word must than shall. So you'll see a lot of changes on that. Some of the discretionary authorities that agencies used to have been deleted, just not because they don't have the authority anymore, but on the theory that you don't have to tell an agency that they can do something, because the general FAR principle is if it's not prohibited in the FAR, you can do it. A lot of those discretionary authorities are now in the guides, the companion guide and the upcoming buying guide. So something like asking for a re-representation from a small business for an order that's not in the FAR text anymore, although I think it should be. It's not in the FAR text anymore. Instead, it's in the FAR companion guide. The FAR made an interesting choice in deleting some of the definitions that were previously in the FAR and just saying, well, these are common terms. You can go to the dictionary and look at the definition. That's going to be fun for lawyers as they get into trying to figure out what these terms mean, because there are different dictionaries out there and there's different case law out there. If it's not in the regulation, then that's a item for dispute, and parties in court will try to come up with their own definition, and they might not be the same. There were areas in the FAR that duplicate other agency regulations. So one primary one is, how do you file a protest at the Government Accountability Office? How do you file a bid protest? GAO has a long list of procedures, and the FAR duplicated that list. Same thing with Bureau of Indian Affairs. There's a procedure there for challenging the status of an Indian-owned firm that was also duplicated in the FAR. The FAR has said, first of all, those regulations change a lot. We don't want to keep up with all those changes. So we're just going to reduce the repetition and take those out and leave it up to those agencies to put in their own procedures. And then in certain areas, the FAR has moved to commercial preference. So one major item is construction now is included as a potential commercial product, a commercial service, and the applicability of terms to commercial items has changed. So one example that you'll see up in the slide deck is that the reporting of executive compensation, and contractors have to report into FSRS the payment for their executives. That reporting now does not apply to companies that only have commercial contracts. That's a new exclusion that's in the FAR. So the FAR has changed, has looked more closely at trying to reduce the burden on companies that sell only commercial products or services to the federal government. That's consistent across all the parts of the FAR. I mentioned that soon, at some point, maybe in the next few months, the public will have an opportunity to comment, and that the courts require that agencies consider and respond to significant public comments. So significant is in the eye of the beholder, but if you put in data, you put in your own experience, you make it relevant to the FAR, you're more likely to be considered significant. It also helps if you bring up a small business issue. And the key here is that if the agency does not respond to a significant public comment, a court could actually walk in and validate the rule. I wrote an article on GovCon Intelligence this week about why I think that's probably unlikely to happen, because there's just not that many huge policy changes in the FAR, but it still does force the FAR Council to think about some of the changes that it's made. The notice and comment process will happen through a particular government website up there, regulations.gov. While we're in this period before that comment process, before this rulemaking is finalized, I want to note the uncertainty that it creates for you out there as contractors. It's hard now to tell whether the agency is using the old FAR or the FAR overhaul. If you're military contractors, you're probably okay. DoD has not adopted any of the provisions of the revolutionary FAR overhaul. So they're still using the existing FAR, the one that is up at acquisition.gov, the ones that is in 48 CFR. Some of the other agencies, though, DOT, GSA, I think VA has adopted a few of them. They are more sporadic. Some of them have adopted all of the RFOs. Some of them have adopted some of it, and then it's even more uncertain whether it actually goes into contracts. Additionally, there's an uncertainty within the small business space because the FAR changed the small business rules ahead of SBA. SBA hasn't announced one way or the other whether it's going to change its small business rules. So currently there's an inconsistency between what the FAR overhaul says on very important small business issues as compared to what SBA has in its regulations. If those issues come up to SBA, things like, do you have to be small at the order level, or does a follow-on contract have to go to the 8A firm that received the initial contract? If those issues come up to SBA, it's no telling what SBA will do because there's a set of rules at SBA that says one thing, and then there's a set of rules in the FAR overhaul that says something else. So there is this period of uncertainty while we wait for the final rules and furthermore for SBA action. So I'm going to go through first the changes for SBA, just because that's where I come from, and then I'll go through some more general changes in the FAR overhaul. So all this is said with the caveat that this is the material that's in their so-called model deviations. Some agencies have gone ahead with this. Some agencies are waiting for the final rule. This might change before the final rule, but this is currently the thinking of the FAR drafters, and it's in implementation for several agencies. All right, so this is where I start to have a little bit of fun with this with my sports fandom from the 1980s, 1990s. So for each of these sections, I have a athlete from my youth with the uniform number for the section. So part 19 is small business, and uh, Tony Gwynn was almost a 400 hitter in my child. I think he almost hit 400 in the strike year, which was like 1993, and then that season ended prematurely, so he didn't get credit for going for 400. It's kind of crazy that he was hitting so well because last year, if you notice, the top hitter in the National League hit like 305 or something. Like no one's even close to 350 or 400 anymore. Part 19 is the small business section. I have two slides. So there's one slide about the general impact on small businesses and another one about the 8A impact. Part 19 had almost a 30% word count reduction. A lot of that word count is in taking out uh, mentions of the OSDBUs, Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization Offices. There were long sections about what the OSDBUs do, what the small business specialists do. The FAR overhaul took a lot of that out. It's still in statute, fortunately. There's still OSDBUs that are around. There's some agencies have cut their staffs, but OSDBUs are still required. But for whatever reason, the FAR took out a lot of the language around OSDBUs. But one of the important changes to the FAR, well, first of all, an important non-change is that the FAR kept the rule of two. Many people were watching, me included, as to whether the FAR would keep the rule of two because the rule of two is non-statutory. It's not something that, based on the executive order, would be required to be kept. The rule of two is the rule that says that agencies must set aside a contract for small business if two or more small businesses can perform that requirement at a fair market price. The FAR kept that for contracts, but not for orders. In late 2024, early 2025, both the FAR and SBA had proposed to expand the reach of the rule of two so that it would apply to orders, but the FAR overhaul reversed that or declined to implement that. And then the companion guide, the FAR companion guide, specifies that the rule of two does not apply to orders. That means agencies can go ahead with a full and open order off of a multiple award IDIQ contract without considering whether two or more small businesses can perform that, without having to do that set aside market research. So that's an important clarification. The rule of two applies for contracts, but not for orders. Uh, the second big change is that set aside programs are now in parity with each other. Previously, agencies had to look at one of SBA's 4 socioeconomic programs before using a small business set aside. The 4 are the 8A program, the women-owned program, the service-able veteran-owned program, and the HUBZone program. So those 4 programs were elevated above small business set asides. Now small business set asides joins those 4 programs in parity, meaning an agency can use any of those 5 strategies without having to consider any one of them before the other. That's not true with the VA. The VA still has a special responsibility to use veteran-owned and service-able veteran-owned set-asides, but it's true for all the other agencies. They can go ahead with a small business set-aside without first considering one of those 4 socioeconomic programs. And the third change is the rule on order level re-representation. That's the question of, if you were small at the time of the contract, you also have to be small when an agency issues an order off of a multiple award contract. So this comes up in the case of some of these big multiple award vehicles, things like Oasis Plus or the GSA schedule. There's just a GAO case about that order level re-representation at GSA schedule. And the SBA rules now say one thing, which is, for the most part, you do have to be small or you do have to be qualified at the time of the order. And now the FAR says something different. The FAR says you look back to the contract, which means you don't necessarily have to be small at the time of order. Who's right? I think it depends on who gets the question at this point. If it comes to SBA, maybe SBA will follow its rules. If it comes to maybe GAO or to the agency, maybe they'll follow the FAR overhaul. But that is going to be a big issue because it comes up every once in a while anyway. I mean, we just saw a case from GAO this week about it. It's going to continue to come up, and there's going to be even more confusion over at what point do you have to be small or eligible for a small business order. The impact on 8A firms, and I started out by saying this is a strange time for 8A firms with the ongoing 8A audit and attention from Department of Justice. There were changes in the FAR overhaul with respect to 8A firms as well. Number one is that the FAR overhaul is now directing agencies to use competition for 8A awards rather than using sole source awards. One of the big benefits of the 8A program is being able to get sole source awards below $5.5 million. Now, the FAR overhaul is telling agencies to prefer competition using one of those 8A vehicles that is out there. It could be 8A stars, supply schedule. There's a pool on Oasis Plus. There's a few other ones, Polaris, that came out as well. So agencies are being asked to use those vehicles first, or consider those vehicles rather than looking directly at a sole source. The other big change is to the so-called once 8A, always 8A rule. That's the rule that if a contract is in the 8A program and the agency goes out for a follow-on, it should keep that follow-on in the 8A program. It doesn't have to necessarily go to the same contractor, to the same 8A contractor, but the agency is told by SBA you should use an 8A competition or use an 8A sole source for that follow-on contract. That rule in the FAR overhaul is being watered down because the FAR overhaul is telling agencies they can avoid that rule by using a set-aside under one of the other 3 socioeconomic programs. That's the HUBZone program, service-able veteran, and women-owned. And that acts as an automatic release of the once 8A, always 8A rule. And that makes it maybe slightly less attractive to be in the 8A program. I don't know that it'll make a big difference in whether agencies use the 8A program in the first place, because some agencies were reluctant to put something in the 8A program because of that once 8A, always 8A rule. In other words, they were reluctant to put something in there forever and ever because they knew they wouldn't be able to get it out. All right, so other important changes outside of small business, I'll look at part 4. Brett Favre here in the snow. This would be a good day for him. I guess he never wore gloves. Part 4 is it's a general FAR part about administrative matters. And the big impact of part 4 is going to be changes to SAM.gov. Those of you who sign up for SAM.gov, remember how long that takes, and then you have to do your annual re-representation. There are a lot of representations and certifications in SAM.gov, and the change to part 4 is going to limit those SAM.gov representations to just those that are called entity level representations. Now that includes small business, so you'll still have to put in your size standards, and NAICS codes for small business, but there are going to be other representations that are taken out of SAM that are called so-called procurement specific or by submission of offer. Those are going to go to contract level or agency level representations. I'm interested to see how that works out, because that may mean that some agencies, defense in particular, may have to come up with their own SAM.gov type systems to capture those representations, or they'll have you literally sign something with the contract with these contract level representations. The idea of SAM.gov was to kind of streamline those representations and kind of moving away from that now. Additionally, another big change to Part 4 was this executive compensation that I mentioned I mentioned previously, that it's not included now in contracts for commercial products and services. So those of you that have to go into FSRS to put in your executive compensation, you may get some relief from that. It really depends on whether you have any non-commercial contracts, because if you have just, seems like if you just have one uh, qualified non-commercial contract, you would have to go into FSRS and put in your executive compensation. So it's really only the case where you only have commercial contracts that would make a difference. All right, here's LeBron James. I think he's changed to 23 now, but I really couldn't find a number 6 that came out. I have to think about that if there's another good number 6. But here he is with the Miami Heat. Part 6 is about competition. This is the section that tells agencies when they can use a sole source, when they have to compete items. One big area here is all the SBA programs, 8A program, Service Able Vet, HUBZone, Women Owned. Those actually all have sole source authorities. It's not just 8A that has sole source authority. It's just that agencies don't use them very often because they require a little bit more paperwork than the 8A program. The Part 6 gets rid of all the specific mentions of those programs. So it used to be separate sections for 8A, Service Able Vet, Women Owned, et cetera. But the new Part 6, the overhauled Part 6, just consolidates that into a mention that it's kind of confusing, 15 USC Chapter 14A. That's the section of the US Code that contains all of those programs. So when you see, if you see 15 USC Chapter 14A, what that means is SBA programs. Part 6 does make a change to allowing phase 3 sole sources under SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research Program. So this is an important change. The SBIR program has 3 phases. Phase 1 and 2 are research phases, and then part 3 is a commercialization phase. And for years, agencies have used Part 3 under SBA guidance to say that they can go directly to a prior SBIR awardee without competition. The agency would be able to award a sole source phase 3 award. That has not been in the FAR previously, but now it makes it into the FAR overhaul, which is important for companies that have had previous SBIR awards. Really fast and meaningful way to get a sole source award if you have a previous SBIR phase 1 or phase 2 award. There was just a GAO case about the phase 3 authority a couple days ago. And then Part 6 does have the requirements for justifications and authorizations, or J&As. These are special documents that agencies have to fill out when they go forward with a sole source award or limited competition. And that's now all in a table format rather than being put out in prose as they had in the FAR. Okay, next is Kobe Bryant with the Lakers. I think at some point he was 23 as well. There's I don't know I mean, it's labor laws is part 23, but I do not have 23 in here, so I don't have Michael Jordan on this list. Part 8 is about required sources of supply within the FAR. So these are things like Ability 1 or JWAD, things that areas that agencies have to look at before they move forward with a contract. And this is a major change. I don't know that it's going to impact construction or engineering, but certainly it appears within IT and other professional services. Agencies will have to shift to required use contracts under Part 8. The first draft of this, when it came out in August, initially told agencies that they would have to use best-in-class contracts, which is an existing term. Best-in-class contracts are things like 8A stars or Oasis Plus, and that would be a humongous change because agencies are used to making their own contract, not being required to use best-in-class. There's a big uproar among me and other small business advocates about this because about 95% of small businesses are excluded from best-in-class contracts. And the FAR Council listened to that uproar, fortunately, and changed the term to required use contracts. They have not said what contracts are required use contracts yet, but once the FAR Council issues a list of required use contracts, and it could be something as simple as, say, office supplies, the agencies will be required to use those. I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. The agencies will have to go with the required use contracts before they make their own contracts. Uh, Agencies are also being told that they should consider other government-wide contracts. So these are a lot of those GSA vehicles or SOUP or CIOSP4. Those are government-wide contracts, and agencies are being told to use the government-wide contracts before they make their own contracts. Part 8 used to have all of the GSA schedule requirements. That was 8.4, and those are all going into a separate manual, the GSAM, the GSA manual. And one interesting part about that is that the FAR used to have a limit on uh, single source BPAs, so not multiple word BPAs, but single company BPAs, blanket purchase agreements. And to say that they can't be longer than 5 years and they can't be more than, I think it was like $25 million. There was a threshold on it before you'd have to go to multiple award, because the idea was you don't want to lock the agency into just using one source. But this manual is taking away those limits. So now you could presumably have a very long BPA, well past 5 years, and dollar unlimited BPA with just one company. I don't know that agencies are going to do that. I think agencies would be concerned about this lock-in, but you'll probably see it at some point that agencies will use a sole source blanket of purchase agreement that very much exceeds the former limits that were in the FAR. Okay, we got Messi at number 10. One of my favorite things is just watching YouTube videos of Messi, and I think he's in the championship tomorrow for the MLS. So that'll be fun. Part 10 in the far as about market research. It's really cut down now. I mean, really, all it says is the big text there that agencies have to have responsible and constructive exchanges with industry. The the significant part to market research for me is that it cut out a lot of the small business market research requirements. There used to be 10 different requirements in the former FAR Part 10 as to small business, and it cuts that out entirely. There is some guidance in the companion guide, particularly under 19, the companion guide about what agencies should do to find small businesses and reach out to them, but that's not required anymore under Part 10. So we do lose something by having the not having the small businesses mentioned in Part 10. Number 12, I don't know how people who are Miami Dolphins fans or Jets fans or Bills fans feel about this, but I probably would agree that Tom Brady is the GOAT at number 12. Number 12 was a big change for the FAR. It covers commercial products and services. I mentioned before that construction is now considered commercial. And the change in Part 12 is now you use simplified acquisition procedures for every commercial project or service under $7.5 million. That used to be, if you remember, it was called the Commercial Item Test Program. Now that's not a test program anymore. That's now required under the FAR. And it means using RFQs. It means using discretion to evaluate quotations, no required evaluation factors, maybe using standing price quotations or unpriced purchase orders. So agencies are getting a lot more discretion to purchase commercial products and services under $7.5 million using these simplified acquisition procedures. That's going to be a lot more like commercial industry than what you're might be used to seeing with Part 15 requirements, whether Section L and Section M and all that. The RFQs could essentially look completely different from what you've seen in the past. One other thing to mention, I don't think I came up with the number 13. I don't know who that would be. A lot of the stuff from the previous FAR Part 13 is now in Part 12. So Part 13 is a lot shorter. It's really just non-commercial products and services under the simplified acquisition threshold. And they haven't kept a lot of that material in there. All right, the other YouTube habit I have is watching videos of Jokic from Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets. He's on a tear right now. He's got I think he's got almost a 70% effective shooting percentage if you take together his threes and twos. And one interesting stat I heard is that he has led the Denver Nuggets in points, rebounds, and assists for 9 straight years now. Incredible. Part 15. Oh, I did the wrong headline here. I guess I did probably a copy and paste, but Part 15, I'm sorry, Part 15 is the negotiated, the part about negotiated contracts, it's not commercial products and services, negotiated contracts. And the text is correct here. The negotiated uh, contracts used to be called discussions. So you used to say if you get to a Part 15 contract and the agency wants to negotiate your proposal, you'd call that a discussion. That is now changed. It's now called a negotiation rather than a discussion. And there's a distinction between negotiations and clarifications. Clarifications are where it's non-material or the agency is trying to clear up an ambiguity. In that case, you're not really allowed to revise your proposal. But if the agency negotiates with you, then you do revise your proposal. The agency has different ways to evaluate proposals. You've probably heard of lowest price technically acceptable. You've heard of best value. There's a new way, which is called highest technically rated at a fair and reasonable price, which means everybody who has a fair and reasonable price gets put into a bucket, and then the highest technically rated firm or proposal from that bucket can get the award. So the agency is making clear, if it uses that evaluation strategy, that it's emphasizing technical capability over price. Another big change in Part 15 about negotiated procurements is the selection of a competitive range. It's kind of circular now. The competitive range is the group of contractors that go on to negotiations, and the new definition says it's the competitive range will include offers best suited for further negotiation. So it's basically just telling the agency, you select who you want for negotiations, you put them in the competitive range, and then you go into negotiations. The rule still remains from GAO case law and prior practice that if the CO starts negotiations, the CO must negotiate with all of the companies that are in the competitive range. The CO may then further negotiate with one or more offerors. The Part 15 comes with a companion guide, and it has this best value continuum from lowest price technically acceptable to trade-off to highest technically rated with a fair and reasonable price, that new term. There's also an opportunity in the companion guide for agencies to use what they're calling advisory down selects. And that's basically telling companies that don't make phase one of the competition that they're probably not going to move on, but they're not entirely eliminated yet. The agency still might include them at the end of the day. The reason for this really for agencies is that they don't have to debrief those phase one companies when they're eliminated initially. They can wait until the end of the process for debriefing. But you may hear advisory down select as you go through your new procurements. And if that's the case, you can look at the companion guide to see what that means. 36, Jerome Bettis, the bus. This is your section about construction, architect, engineer contracts. There's a number of provisions that are removed as mandatory. The source selection criteria are now discretionary. Site inspections are now discretionary. Agencies still might do that. But one thing that is removed as mandatory is the 12% rule about performance of work. I also wanted to mention that the FAR companion guide states that the FAR permits in a two-stage procurement up to 4 offers, but the companion guide is encouraging agencies to just use 3 in phase 2 to limit the amount of work required for the phase 2 proposals. Okay, a few other things. Subcontracts. That was John Riggins, by the way. Subcontracts on this eliminates the required threshold for contracting purchasing system reviews, and now it changes the list of flow down clauses to a table of flow down clauses, but it doesn't give as much guidance as the former Part 44. The new guidance is just you flow down to subcontracts for commercial products and services as indicated in the specific clause, which means you're gonna have to go out and read that clause, unfortunately. A few other changes. I mentioned the reduction in the roles of small business specialists and OSDBUs. There's a lot there. There was more there in Part 7 that's been reduced. The Part 16, which is about on multiple award contracts, that allows blanket purchase agreements on multiple award contracts. That's not something that we'd seen in the past. And then also SBIR did not get the 20-year data rights in this.
Well, Sam, hey, I really appreciate it. There's a lot to digest that's been going on here. So, and to be able to pack it into 45, 50 minutes. So really appreciate your time here. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So I really appreciate Sam throwing a lot of the updates that have been coming in here. So if you have any questions for Sam, please feel free to add it into the Q&A. We do have a couple that we want to dive right into at the beginning. So Sam, how will the FAR overhaul changes really to part 19 parity among set aside, removal of the order of entry representation really affects small businesses' ability to compete for federal contracts?
There are going to be some small businesses that do really well. The main gist of some of these changes is more consolidation. Fewer contracts, fewer things for agencies to look at, and some small businesses are going to be on these consolidated contracts. They're going to be bigger contracts. There's just going to be fewer of them, but that's not great if you're a startup small business or you don't have some of the capabilities of larger small businesses or small businesses that have partners. In that case, you're probably going to be looking at needing to find partners or joint venture possibilities or mentor protege. So I think it puts a lot of pressure on small businesses to look closely at partnerships and try to find which of these consolidated vehicles they can get on.
Got it. And I'm going to hit rapid fire on these questions. So,
Okay.
so Angie Martinez asked, so what are the impacts of changing construction to a commercial service?
I think it allows agencies to use the simplified acquisition procedures to purchase construction in Part 12. By changing construction to commercial, agencies can use RFQ. So you might end up seeing requests for quotations that are pretty similar to what you might see from states or from industry, rather than having to look at a more Part 15 type RFP that has all the different sections. It can end up being extremely informal. And then additionally, agencies can use standing price quotes. If you have a catalog of prices that you use with an agency may be able to purchase directly off of that because commercial items allow for those sort of strategies.
Got it. So Susan at Miller Remick asked, so why isn't the SBA represented on the FAR Council?
That's a great question. Basically, it's because Congress hasn't decided that to be the case. There have been proposals in the past for SBA to be represented on the FAR Council. That has not passed. The original creation of the FAR Council had 3 agencies. It's Department of Defense, General Services Administration, and NASA. Those are the 3 voting members. I suppose they want an odd number so that you can at least have a 2-to-1 vote if necessary. There have been proposals to put SBA on. Those haven't passed. The one area where SBA is represented is in the Regulatory Flexibility Act. The SBA Office of Advocacy can review FAR rules under the Regulatory Flexibility Act and give the perspective of a small business. So if you have a particular perspective, that should go to SBA Office of Advocacy. That's kind of a separate office from SBA. They have a separate Senate confirmed head. That's not the SBA administrator.
Got it. Okay. So doesn't the 8A, going back to another question from Angie, doesn't the 8A competition preferred part say something, if it's possible, use competition. But if there's not enough time, for example, year end, sole source can be used just because they could say there's not enough time.
I think that'll be the case. I think you're absolutely right. The preference now is for competition, but a lot of things have to line up for an agency to be able to compete. Like the product has to be on the competitive list. It has to be on those contracts, and the agency has to have enough time to do the competition. The whole point, well, not the whole point, but one of the biggest selling points of the 8A program is that it's fast. You can do a sole source contract very quickly. And agencies often, as the question indicates, get to the end of the year, they need to award a contract. So they use the 8A program or, find other sole source strategies. That'll continue to happen, I would think. I think the FAR is just trying to make the point that this is an additional measure that agencies have to go through. So there may be a document the agency has to put in the file to say, look, we didn't have enough time to do a competition.
Great. And then Bradley asks, how do we get registered to get a notification for review of this new language?
You can go to sign up on my website, GovCon Intelligence, and I'll put something out when the proposed rule comes out. I imagine there's also some sort of email list that you can sign up for on regulations.gov. That's where it's going to come out. It's going to come out on regulations.gov.
Got it. And then Shante asks, what do you, I think it's towards the beginning of your, when you started diving into it, he goes, what do you mean that all the 8As received their request today?
There was news that broke just this morning that either yesterday or early today, 8A firms received a request for documents from SBA. SBA had announced months and months ago that it was going to audit the 8A program. They called it a full-scale audit of the 8A program. And based on the news that's coming out, it seems like that audit has started this week. So reportedly, 8A firms have 30 days to put together their documents and reply to SBA.
Got it. Okay. We do have a couple other questions, but we do want to wrap up because we're getting close to the top of the hour. So I know Sam will have a few additional minutes. So really do appreciate, Sam, your time here. Thank you very much. This is a very topic that's front of mind for everybody, especially the 8A firms and small businesses in general. But before we wrap up our program today, I'd like to share with you a couple of upcoming events that we do have planned. So please mark your calendars for not only local posts, but also national events. So join us next month for our January 1st Friday webinar on Friday, January 9th. That's going to be the second first Friday in January. So Fox Rothschild is going to bring you this timely presentation on how contractors can benefit from innovative procurement methods like OTA, CSOs, and CDMs. So many government agencies are looking at how to deliver projects faster, with more options, with other transaction authorities, commercial solution openings, and collaborative delivery methods, which are just some of the ways you need to know about when understanding the nuances and potential risks about project delivery. And registration is actually open now. And are you interested in sharing your knowledge on current educational topics with this First Friday series? We are accepting presentation abstracts for 2026, so please visit our website and submit your abstract and topic today. And sponsorships are available to support this ongoing program. Some of the upcoming SAME national events, the 2026 Career Transition Workshop is returning for both the virtual component in January and live sessions in February. If you're transitioning from the military to private industry, or you're simply looking for job changes, this program will help you update your resume, understand upcoming career options, and help you network within the SAME community. And registration is open. The members only event is SAME Capital Week, is right in our backyard in Rockville. Learn more about upcoming programs from all the government agencies to help align your business development and support the government's mission. And join us in Portland, Oregon for the SAME Joint Engineering Training Conference. This event brings together programs and training to get you all the PDHs you'll need for the year ahead. Abstracts are being accepted now for technical programs and are due on January 7th. Learn more about the conference at samejetc.org. So we have a very busy schedule here for the DC Post. If you're a young professional and love to learn more about the DC and Nova Post award-winning leadership and mentoring program, please let them know that applications are open until next Friday, December 12th. Participants in the LMP program have the opportunity to meet with top leaders in the government and local industry to help them achieve their current goals and learn more. I was a LMP member, had a great time in it, so definitely apply today. So each year, the DC and Nova Post support the Wreaths Across America program at Arlington National Cemetery. Wreaths Lane will be held on Saturday, December 13th. That is next Saturday. At the morning event, after the morning event, join us for a no-host lunch and gathering at Open Road in Roslyn, which is nearby. But if you can't volunteer, you can be more than happy to donate a wreath on their website. And we'll be sending out more information about Wreaths Across America, so we hope you can join us. The DC Post 30th Annual Awards and Military Service Branch Awards program is coming up on Wednesday, January 28th at the National Press Club. Nominations are open now. It's a great time to reconnect with someone who's made an impact in the military, government, or AEC community. Registration to attend the awards program is now open, as well as sponsorship opportunities are available. We'd like to support the special Pearl Anniversary event. So the Transatlantic Energy Security Symposium is coming up quickly on Wednesday, February 4th at the Press Club. Join architecture, engineering, construction community for this one-day event focused on energy security for facilities. You'll hear from policy updates, insights directly from experts in the legislative as well as executive branches. So don't miss this great opportunity to stay ahead of emerging priorities that are shaping our industry. And registration is open, and save on tickets if you purchase before December 31st. And we have a couple more. So save the date for the APA Federal Planning Workshop, which is going to be returning to DC on March 31st and April 1st at the National Press Club. There's a 2-day conference that is in partnership with the APA Federal Planning Division and the DC Post. We're bringing together planners, architects, engineers, and facility professionals to talk about policy updates, planning strategies, and collaborations across the agencies. So mark your calendar today. So DC Post website is full of all of our upcoming educational and social events throughout the year. Make sure you connect with us on LinkedIn, where we share industry news, photos, also while building a strong network within the AEC industry. So please look out for future First Friday webinar series, as well as on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to support a global community of over 7,000 architecture, engineering, construction, technology leaders, with an annual Post sponsorship, you'll have the opportunity to leverage our network to showcase your firm with visibility and international recognition you won't find anywhere else. Support the Post program sponsorship, just like this First Friday series, and as well as the individual events throughout the year, like the upcoming symposium at the National Press Club. Check out all the benefits on our website to support DC, the mission of DC Post. So again, thank you for attending the First Friday webinar. And Sam, thank you for providing great educational content for today's session. If you haven't, you can download today's documents before you leave the webinar, or you can wait for the document delivery with your slide, PDH certificate, and an opt-in list of registered participants today. And we will post this recording on our website later on. You may also get an email from Sam with more information on what was presented today and how you can sign up for his newsletter and any announcements on upcoming events as well. So lastly, thank you again to the DC Post sponsors, Fox Rothschild, KCCT, Parsons, and Stantec. So on behalf of myself, Bree Beal, and Samantha Long, have a great weekend and a great holiday season. And we look forward to seeing you at an upcoming SAME event soon. So thank you again. Thank you, everyone.